The Hollywood Unapologetic Podcast with Orlando Delbert, Filmmaking Essentials. Okay, so think about the last time, some big news broke. How did you actually find out about it?
Mm-hmm.
Chances are, especially like if you're a bit younger, it was probably scrolling, right? Maybe even TikTok popped up with something.
Yeah, definitely. It's this strange situation we're in, isn't it?
Totally. You get information like that super fast. But does that speed mean we're losing something like depth or even knowing who to, trust?
That's pretty much the core issue we're getting into today. These digital platforms, and TikTok is a huge one, they've really fundamentally changed how information hits us, especially, big global stuff.
Right.
The speed is amazing, sure, but figuring out what's credible, that takes like a whole new skill set.
Exactly. Which brings us right to the main topic, citizen war journalism on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to focus on how young adults are seeing this stuff, engaging with it, and the big one, trusting it.
Yeah.
And we'll use the recent Israel-Gaza crisis as a sort of case study. It's intense, very current.
Yeah, absolutely. And to help us unpack all this, we've got some really interesting source material lined up.
Okay.
The main one is this research paper from Södertörn University in Stockholm. It's actually titled Citizen War Journalism on TikTok.
Catchy.
Huh. Yeah. It looks specifically at how young adults judge the trustworthiness of war stuff they see on the platform. But we're also bringing in some other angles.
Like what?
Well, for instance, we've got some bits on The Conqueror, that old John Wayne movie.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the one with the, let's just say, creator casting.
That's the one. But it's more than just like a weird movie fact. There were some really serious health questions later on related to nuclear testing nearby during filming.
Right. I remember hearing something about that. A lot of the cast and crew got sick later.
Exactly. We also have just the title, unfortunately, of an Atlantic Council piece. Media coverage of Ukraine must balance public interest and victim privacy.
Okay, so even the title itself points to a conflict there.
Right. Then there's Vietnam, the first television war, from Pieces of History, how TV changed things back then. We found a Reddit thread discussing media's role in Vietnam ending.
Oh, interesting. Bet there were some strong opinions there.
Definitely. And also War Crimes Watch Ukraine from Frontline and AP. Pretty stark documentation.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, just some details on the Södertörn study's ethics, like their consent forms and GDPR compliance. So yeah, quite a mix.
Okay, quite the range. So what's our kind of mission here? What are we trying to figure out from all this?
Well, the goal is really to get a handle on how young adults are consuming news today, particularly this kind of citizen-generated content from war zones on TikTok. How do they interact with it? What makes them trust or not trust what they see?
And then maybe pull out some bigger ideas.
Exactly. Broader insights into how we all process information during conflicts and how trust works or doesn't in this very new media world.
Okay, makes sense. Let's dive into that Södertörn study first then. It looked at young people in Austria and Sweden. Yeah.
That's right.
So what did it say about how they're even using TikTok for news? Is it their main source?
Well, what's interesting is TikTok's obviously built for entertainment, right?
Right. Cat videos, dances.
Exactly. But the study found young adults do bump into news there, and sometimes they even look for it. But often, it's what the researchers called incidental exposure. Meaning they're just scrolling their main feed, the For You page, and boom, war content shows up between other stuff.
Ah, okay. Not necessarily seeking it out.
Not always. A smaller group did use the search bar for news, especially during something like the Israel-Gaza crisis. They might look for quick updates or, what's happening right now on the ground.
And are they worried about reliability when they do that?
Not always top priority in that moment, it seems. It's more about getting a quick snapshot, a fast overview.
So it's not like they're ditching BBC News or the New York Times entirely for TikTok explainers.
No, not according to this study anyway. Traditional news definitely still has its place. But TikTok offers this very immediate, seemingly unfiltered view. Seemingly?
Well, yeah. Perceived as unfiltered, maybe. The study also talks about the producer concept.
Producer-consumer.
Exactly. Someone who makes and consumes content. And citizen journalists, defined here as just like ordinary people sharing their view. They're a big part of that.
Okay. And the study drew a line between these citizen journalists and war influencers, didn't it?
Wait.
What's the difference there?
Yeah, good distinction. They define citizen journalists as these non-professionals sharing news, sometimes blurring into activism almost. The study actually highlighted how they can, complement traditional news by offering constant updates, different angles, that kind of thing.
Okay. And influencers.
War influencers were seen more as online personalities, people who built a following around their lives or interests, and in this case, that interest happens to be war.
So it feels more personal.
Right. They might feel like someone you already follow or could follow easily. It makes distant events feel closer, more immediate maybe, than watching a news anchor.
Did the study use follower count to decide who's who? No, not really. It wasn't about a specific number. It seemed more about the intent the young adults perceived. Is this person sharing news, or are they building a brand around the conflict? That seemed to be the key difference in perception.
Got it. Okay, so we have these different creators. What did the study actually find makes these young Austrians and Swedes trust the war content they're seeing on TikTok? Were there, like, differences between the two countries?
Oh, absolutely. Let's start with what made them mistrust things. That was pretty interesting.
Okay.
For the Austrian group, there was a real skepticism about content from U.S. American creators. Many felt it might be propaganda.
Okay. And the Swedes?
For the Swedish participants, a big factor for mistrust was if the content just didn't line up with their own opinions about the conflict already.
Confirmation bias in action.
Pretty much. It really shows how our existing beliefs filter what we accept, you know?
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
What else made them skeptical?
Both groups were wary of explanations that felt too simple for really complex war situations, even though, TikTok's format kind of pushes that brevity.
Right, it's hard to do nuance in 60 seconds.
Exactly. And interestingly, they also distrusted videos that felt too scripted or like too professionally made.
Wait, really? You'd think better production means more credibility.
It's almost the opposite here in this context. For these young viewers looking at citizen journalism on TikTok, that high production value could feel, I guess, inauthentic, like they weren't getting the real boots on the ground story.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so what did build trust then? What worked?
Trust seemed to grow when the content felt well-argued or emotionally balanced or objective in its presentation.
Okay.
For the Swedish group specifically, having text within the video or like credible-looking captions really helped boost trust. Visuals mattered too for both groups.
How so?
Videos seemed more trustworthy if they included things like graphics or even just thumbnails of news articles. It sort of suggests transparency maybe, or a link back to more established sources.
And what about the actual person making the video? Did their style matter?
Hugely. First-hand accounts, especially from people who seemed like just ordinary civilians, were really highly valued.
Relatability.
Yeah, exactly. If these people presented themselves with what felt like an authentic attitude in a way the viewers could relate to, trust went up.
Interesting.
Even things you might think would hurt credibility, like shaky amateur footage or hearing sirens or conflict sounds in the background, that could actually increase trust. Same with posts where the creator showed some emotional vulnerability or awareness. It seems that rawness was seen as genuine.
So not polished, not perfect. More like, this is real, this is happening to me.
Precisely. The study also mentioned, especially for Austrians, that if the content matched what they already knew or thought about the situation, they were more likely to trust that creator. Like the creator was validating their existing view.
Okay, so it really sounds like they're looking for someone who feels like a real person, an everyday individual caught in these insane circumstances, just sharing what they see and feel.
You've nailed it. And that ties right into this idea of parasocial interaction the study talks about.
Right, feeling like you know someone you only see online.
Exactly. On platforms like TikTok, you can build these one-sided connections with creators, and the persona of that citizen journalist seeming relatable, authentic, like a peer rather than a distant celebrity, that's crucial for building that bond, and therefore trust.
And seeing them repeatedly probably helps too.
Definitely. Repeated exposure strengthens that feeling of connection over time.
So it's way more than just the facts being presented. It's who is sharing it and how they come across.
Absolutely. And that brings in the uses and gratifications theory. The study suggests young adults use TikTok around the Israel-Gaza crisis for, well, a mix of reasons. Yes, getting info, but also feeling socially connected, even a kind of an engagement that isn't quite entertainment, but keeps them involved.
Do they mention avoiding news sometimes? It can get overwhelming?
Yeah, some did. Mentioned actively avoiding news that felt too much, too negative. But others talked about fact-checking stuff that really grabbed their attention. So it's not entirely passive consumption.
And did the study touch on the emotional impact? Like, does this citizen stuff hit differently than, say, watching the nightly news?
Yes, that was a really key finding. Many felt that citizen journalism on TikTok was a more relatable and empathetic way to grasp the conflict.
More human.
Yeah, maybe. The personal stories often seem to evoke more compassion than perhaps the more detached traditional reporting style might. This matches up with other research too, like a study they cited about the 2021 Israeli-Palestinian conflict on TikTok.
What did that find?
It found that personal stories from Palestinians actually got more engagement than like official PR messages. Those individual human narratives just seem to have a really powerful effect.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How different this is from how, say, my parents' generation experienced war coverage. We looked at that source, Vietnam, the first television war. How does that compare to TikTok today?
Well, Vietnam was really a turning point, wasn't it? It was the first time war footage, often uncensored, pretty graphic stuff, was beamed directly into living rooms every night.
Yeah, the living room war.
Right. And many argue that seeing the reality, the casualties, the human cost day after day, it heavily influenced public opinion, fueled the anti-war movement, and ultimately pressured politicians.
That Reddit thread we saw people still debate exactly how much impact the media had, right?
Oh yeah, lots of different views. But there's a general agreement that the visuals on TV had a power that print or radio just didn't have before in shaping how people saw the war.
So TikTok is kind of like the new television in that sense, but maybe even more direct because it's often straight from the individuals on the ground.
That's a really good parallel, I think. And just like TV bypassed some traditional news gatekeepers back then, TikTok does something similar now.
But it's messier.
Much messier, arguably. The sheer volume, the range of voices on TikTok, plus the algorithm deciding what you see, it creates a really complex, sometimes confusing information space.
Yeah, that algorithm piece is huge, which actually makes me think about that other source, The Conqueror.
Right, the John Wayne film.
Yeah, the whole thing with the nuclear testing nearby. It's kind of a chilling example of how official assurances, the government saying, oh, it's safe, can turn out to be, well, wrong, with potentially awful long-term consequences.
It's a stark reminder, definitely.
Is there a parallel we can draw there with the info we get today, especially from maybe less official sources?
I think that's a really crucial connection, actually. The Conqueror story really underscores how incomplete information, or even wrong information, even if it comes with reassurance, can have these massive delayed impacts.
They were told it was fine, right? Filming near the test sites?
Initially, yes, assurances were given. But decades later, you see this cluster of cancer cases among the cast and crew, raising huge questions about that radiation exposure.
Wow.
And it does echo some of the challenges today, doesn't it? In this environment where anyone can broadcast information, figuring out the long-term effects of consuming biased or maybe just inaccurate content is incredibly tough.
That gap between it's safe now and oops, maybe it wasn't, that feels relevant.
It absolutely compels us to be more critical, I think, about all the information we encounter, regardless of the source's apparent authority or lack thereof.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. Thinking about everything, the study, Vietnam, The Conqueror, what are the key things someone scrolling TikTok, seeing this kind of war content, should really keep in mind? What are the big takeaways?
Okay, well, the Soderstern study gives us some clear pointers on trust. First, be aware that mistrust often comes from perceived bias or propaganda, like the Austrian students wary of U.S. sources or Swedes skeptical of views opposing their own.
So know your own biases too.
Exactly. Also, be a bit cautious if something feels too simple an explanation for a complex war, or if it looks overly produced, weirdly enough. That slickness might signal inauthenticity in this specific context.
Right, the counterintuitive finding.
Yeah. On the flip side, trust tends to build when info feels thoughtfully presented, maybe balanced, maybe objective, maybe includes evidence like text or links.
Okay.
And crucially, the person matters. Authenticity, relatability, especially in firsthand accounts from seeming civilians, those are powerful trust builders. Even the raw, amateurish feel can enhance that.
So look for the human element, but critically.
Right. And remember, the algorithm is shaping what you see, big time. Plus, those parasocial bonds feeling connected to a creator, they influence trust too, based on that perceived genuineness, not traditional fame. And finally, just recognize people use TikTok for lots of reasons around these events. Info, connection, engagement, and how they interact depends on their own needs and existing views.
That's a really good summary. Gives us a lot to chew on. So, final question then. In this world where anyone with a phone can basically be a reporter covering incredibly serious stuff like war, what's the final thought we want to leave people with?
I think the fundamental question it forces us to ask is, How do we get better at thinking critically? How do we develop the skills to sift through this constant flood of information and figure out what actually matters, especially when, lives and different perspectives are literally at stake?
It's not easy.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It means being aware of our own filters, actively questioning the stuff we see, making a real effort to find diverse, credible sources. Maybe the most important thing is just encouraging everyone to take a hard look at their own media diet. Why do you trust the sources you trust? Really think about it.
You can find more insights on navigating the entertainment industry and achieving success in Orlando Delbert's work, including his book, Pollyanna's Tear-Soaked Battlefields of Hollywood, a survival guide against the cynicism and the hypocritical, and of course, the Hollywood Unapologetic platform. And always remember, you are the key to your own success. You are the new Hollywood generation.
Be informed, be prepared, and most importantly, be great.
That's it. Be great. Good luck out there.
See you next time.